Tonight we're taking a look back at a crime spree that left women living in downtown Wilmington on edge for nearly a year.
In 2004, a woman said she was raped by a homeless man who broke into her house. In the months that followed, more than a half dozen other women reported attempted sexual assaults by a man fitting the same description. In tonight's Crimes of the Cape Fear, WECT's Ann McAdams takes a look back at the effort to catch that predator, an effort that went terribly wrong when two men took the law into their own hands.
It was a crime spree that kept young women up at night, afraid of being attacked in their own homes.
As I'm walking up to my front door, it's something that would cross my mind every time.
Posters with the image of this wanted man were plastered all over town as police tried to track down a sexual predator.
Multiple young women had been sexually assaulted in the beautiful historic district of downtown Wilmington.
On November 29, 2004, Barry Mintz and David Allen, who worked as bouncers at the Liquid Room, were enjoying their night off. They'd been drinking heavily when they claimed to have heard a woman scream, spotted a homeless man, Joe Bradshaw, who fit the description of the sexual predator, and went after him in a downtown alley.
The victims all said that there was a homeless man that they believed had perpetrated this, that he was African American, approximately 40 years old, with the general height and weight description that looked a whole lot like Joe Bradshaw.
A bartender who had just gotten off work witnessed the attack that followed.
A young woman who actually knew them because they were bouncers downtown. She thought as she walked by the alley that they were breaking down boxes, that they were literally stomping cardboard boxes to flatten them. And then she realized in horror that beneath their feet was not a box, it was a human being.
Joe Bradshaw, the man they brutalized, had nothing to do with the assaults on the young women. Another man, Jerome Bostic, was arrested for those crimes and is now serving a 44-year prison term. But the case of mistaken identity and the decision by two bouncers to take the law into their own hands would cost Joe Bradshaw his life.
The defendants, David Allen and Barry Mintz, played judge, jury, and executioner against a totally innocent person. And I wanted to send the message that if people have concerns that others have committed crimes, they need to report that crime and not take law into their own hands.
After Bradshaw died from massive head trauma, District Attorney Ben David decided to personally prosecute the case against his attackers, the first case he tried after being elected to office.
We frequently say that no one's above the law. But I also want to remind this community that no one's beneath the law's protection, particularly someone who is homeless, living in the shadows.
David Allen agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. He was just released from prison after serving nearly 20 years. But co-defendant Barry Mintz rolled the dice and took the case to trial. His defense, that he was highly intoxicated and thought he was protecting the public from a violent predator.
This was never going to be a whodunit, it was going to be a what do you call it? And we called it first-degree murder.
The jury agreed. Mintz was sentenced to life in prison without parole, which gave some solace to Bradshaw's many family members who attended the trial.
The way he treated my uncle and the repeated stomping and beating and kicking of my uncle, it made me deal with it better to know that he's going to have a long time to think about it.
One of the biggest tragedies of the whole story, Jerome Bostic, the man ultimately convicted as the sexual predator, was locked up 2 months before Joe Bradshaw was attacked in that alley. Whether or not David Allen and Barry Mintz knew the culprit was already arrested when they attacked Bradshaw remains an open question. Fran and John, this did prompt local authorities to take a closer look at a bigger issue, the out-of-control homeless population at the time that was overwhelming Wilmington's resources.
All right, WECT investigative reporter Ann McAdams with the latest installment of our Crimes of the Cape Fear series. Thanks a lot, Ann. As these crimes were unfolding, putting a spotlight on the homeless community, local leaders discovered that many of the people living on the streets of Wilmington were not from here.
Instead, they'd gotten one-way bus tickets given to them by a charity in Myrtle Beach. Our district attorney and police chief convinced that charity to stop that practice, and they also redoubled their efforts of taking care of our own homeless population.